We all seek to live the best life we can, and if we're lucky, to leave a positive legacy of our time on Earth. Fred's legacy was one of the love he carried for his family. My name is Jason Downs, and I'm Fred's oldest grandson, Kathy Lazer's son. Unfortunately, I've got the dreaded COVID, but thanks to technology, I can still deliver this eulogy today. I'm honoured to be asked by our family to deliver Pop's eulogy today on behalf of Fred's 4 children, Donald, Rodney, Catherine and Marie. It's not an easy task condensing 100 years into 10 minutes. So as well as telling you about what he did in his life, I'm really keen to convey the character of his spirit and highlight what was important to Fred Lazer during his long and loving life. To get some context, 10 years ago in 2012, just a few months before Fred's 90th birthday, I embarked on a project to record a video of Fred's life. I spent many hours at Avonhurst Drive interviewing him, and from these interviews, I'm going to retell some of Fred's story through his own words. Fred was born in South Yarra on the 10th of April, 1922, the third of 5 children to Alice May Andrews and Henry Simon Lazer. He had 2 older brothers, Cyril and Bertie, and he had 2 younger sisters, Phyllis and Betty is here with us today. Fred told me, "I was born Fred Lazer, not Frederick. You see, my dad wasn't a fan of the Germans, so he just named me Fred. I was brought up for the first 2 years in South Yarra before we moved to 50 Dallas Avenue, Oakley, where my sisters were born, somewhere around 1924. At Oakley, we had chooks. There were no cars in the street except for Jimmy Wadsworth's father, who owned a Model T Ford. We played cricket in the street, using the lampposts on each side of the road as wickets. I remember that really well from when I was 7 years old. This was the time of the Great Depression, and money was tight. We never had enough money, but we struggled through, bread and dripping. I remember my parents could only afford interest-only payments. It was a tough time, nothing like today. I had to go out and earn money, so from the age of 12, I got a job caddying my brothers at the Yarra Golf Course. That's a long way from Dallas Avenue. Bertie was christened Hercules, Cyril's nickname was Atlas, and my nickname was Samson. That was only at golf though. Bertie had already nicknamed me Ginger Megs because I got into a lot of mischief, so I usually went by Megsy. We each did our turn caddying, and we'd earn 2 and 6 a round to help keep the family going. I'd walk across the paddock each day to school in Poth Road. I could always do arithmetic, I could do the sums, and I'd get out early because I was good at sums, but I wasn't good at writing, I was only good at arithmetic. Bertie was very clued though, and he was picked up to go to Dandenong High School. There were very few high schools around. I didn't go to high school. Instead, I left school at 14 in 1935. I got my merit certificate in November, and I went to a farm. My brother knew this family that lived in Pyramid Hill through caddying at the golf course. I went up to the farm from November 1935 until my 14th birthday on April the 10th, and I spent 4 months on the farm. It made a big difference to my life. I learnt a lot. Mount Hope, Bald Rock, Pyramid Hill. Acres and acres of wheat. I harvested the wheat with them and we bagged it all up. They had thousands of sheep and we drove the sheep along the roads to Kerrang. I did everything they did on the farm. It was a wonderful experience and I wanted to live there. The boss, Mr. McGillivray, he went to Mum and he asked me to stay on. But Mum needed the money and she needed me to work, so I had to go home. And that's how things worked back in 1935. Fred's working life was long. He worked from when he was 14 in 1936 until he was 65 in 1987. And then he continued part-time until he was 70. Fred explained to me, "My first job was running errands in a bicycle place when I was 14. And then I got a job in the GPO for the prosecutor as his messenger boy. At the top of the tower, they had chimes on the quarter hour and half hour. 6 or 8 of us used to go up there and play ball games. Well, one day a boy got badly injured, so the big boss came out and he said, 'Sack the lot of them.' The boys were just skylarking, but the kid did get hurt. Oh, I love that job. I was training to be an accountant because I was good with numbers, but that was not to be. Because they didn't have any tradesmen, they brought in an act that if you worked for more than 6 years in the job, you became a tradesman. So I didn't go to trade school. It was the war, so my experience got me certifications. I was never very happy at work, but I made myself do it, and I was determined to succeed. I started in trades at die casters on the 16th of January 1940. That was in Collingwood. They were making combs and things, but I was on the drilling station right through the war years. My sister Betty worked there too, and that's where she met her husband. My boss was an American. We made every part of the machete knives for the American Army. We made 1 million knives for the Yanks. He was pretty clued on, that guy. In 1946, we had the engineers' strike that lasted a full month. We didn't get any pay, and we had to live off rabbits. It worked though. We got a pay rise. I believe strongly in the right to strike. I was living in Northcote at the time, but when it came to open the factory again, I didn't get my job back. So I went to Fisherman's Bend in aircraft production for 18 months, and I worked on the lathe. After that, I went to Freighters because now I lived in Mentone and it was too far to travel. I worked at Freighters for 26 years, from 1948 to 1974. I was 10 years a shop steward, and during that time the union was trying to get 3 weeks annual leave as we only had 2. There was an Easter break coming up and the union didn't want anyone to work over Easter. So I went around and I told everyone not to work, and the boss sacked me. I was off work for a month. I went before the arbitration court and I was reinstated, and they paid me back all my wages. It was recognised I was right acting as shop steward on behalf of the union. After 10 years, Ted Baker, the manager, came out to see me. He was a friend despite those dramas. He wanted to run a night shift, so I resigned from shop steward and I took on leading hand for the night shift. In 1974, Freighters went to Ballarat and Charlie Smith, my boss, took over the lathes. And so I worked for Charlie for 15 years, including some part-time work after I was retired. I was 70 years old when I stopped working. And Donnie, Fred's son, told me Fred was considered a master tradesman. He was an expert in the lathe, and he was an expert in doing all things for hubs for trucks. That's our Fred. Fred's working life was closely tied to his political views. He was a strong left-wing union man and a lifelong Labor supporter. Donnie, Rodney and Fred actually signed up to hand out pamphlets for Bob Hawke in his 1983 campaign. But apart from that, Fred didn't have political aspirations. He was particularly put off by the factional fighting. As you can tell, Fred wasn't afraid of working to earn money, and he did whatever was necessary to provide for his family. Fred explains, "My brother Cyril was an SP bookmaker doing telephone bets. I worked for him for 20 years, from early 1975 to 1995. It was my second job. It was illegal. We worked at my house in Harcourt Street, other people's houses, the city office, and a place in South Melbourne. It was a real family operation. Cyril, me, Betty, Archie, Betty's husband, and later Don, he took some calls too. I was good at it because I was quick with the figures. It wasn't a lot of money, but it was very helpful. You had to keep changing your phone so you didn't get caught. Bill Collins, the broadcaster, he bet with us, and so did Bert Bright, another broadcaster. I had to keep my head down for 20 years. My brother got caught and my sister got caught, but I managed to keep my head down." Home ownership. Well, Fred was working hard to provide for the family. He had a burning ambition to own his own home, and it was a long but ultimately successful path to achieve it. He and Mavis began renting in Northcote, and then they moved to a shared house in Mentone with 4 other families, before renting a rundown flat at the back of a house in Bond Beach. Donnie was a baby, and Fred was desperate to get their own home. He told me his plan. Mavis was pregnant with Rodney, so we took a room in Fitzroy. But in 1952, we got a letter from the government that said I had a commission place I could rent in Jordanville, which is now known as Ashburton. In 1956, the Victorian government passed a resolution that said people living in commission houses could buy them. I'd bought a block of land years before for £130 in East Bentley, adjoining the Yarra Yarra Golf Club, which I'd already paid off. I couldn't get the bank to lend me money to build the house, so in 1956, I sold the block for £250. I went straight to the government offices, filled in the papers, and I was able to buy that house in Jordanville for £3,500. I'd already been there for 4 years, renting, mind you. Repayments were £15 a month, set at 4%, no variations. I'd go into Holmesglen Station office to pay it off each month. When I lived there in Harcourt Street with Mavis, me and Donnie, it was all commission houses and everyone was just starting off. It was only a 2-bedroom place, but we made it a 3-bedroom place with a sunroom. Big grounds. I loved doing the lawns and keeping the veggie garden. I put up a galvanised garage. We loved it. In 1976, we sold it for $35,000 and we bought the house in Glen Waverley for $30,000. I've owned my own house since January 1977. Religion. Fred's family is Catholic, thanks to Mavis's influence, but there's a strong connection to the Jewish religion on Fred's side of the family. He explained this to me. My grandfather was Jewish, coming on the boat from Romania in the 1890s, stopping in England on the way. He met a woman from England and they ended up getting married on the boat. They had a shop in New South Wales, but my father was born in a rented shop in Carlton. I never met my grandfather as he died before I was born. My father wouldn't let me go to religious instruction at school. He was a practicing Jew, but then he met my mum and I suspect he got her pregnant and he was ostracised from the Jewish religion and most of his family. I never received any religious instruction. My father's brother, Uncle Maury, he was religious and he was brilliant. He sold things and he insisted on picking up my dad once a month and taking him to the synagogue. My dad came to my wedding, even though I'm a Catholic. I changed to Catholicism to marry Mavis, but before that, I knew nothing about religion. When I was interviewing Fred, I asked him to tell me how he met Mavis. It was New Year's Eve 1944. We were staying in the Mount Jeffcott Hotel in Donald. We were all singing songs and we were having a wonderful time. We got to know each other real well. It was a wonderful time. You see how it came about, Frankie Pumper, my mate from Diecasters, he became my best man. We were working 12-hour shifts, 5 days a week, and we were all buggered. He said to me, I know a bloke, Jimmy Macon, a Collingwood cricketer, and he now owns the Mount Jeffcott Hotel in Donald. Mavis came up the next day with her friends and we met her at the train. We all walked back to the pub where we were staying and sat down to talk. I had a bit of competition though, as Jimmy Macon's son, also called Jimmy Macon, he was a bit of a wild man and he wanted to get onto Mavis. But Mavis didn't like him. We all got on thoroughly. It was the best week of my life. We played cards and then we ate. We had geese. I've never had anything like it. You could have geese, you could have duck, you could have chicken, you could have turkey, you could have everything you wanted. Mavis and I had a kiss and a cuddle. We had long walks and talks. We got to know each other. And when we came home, I took her to dances. Originally, I was only going to stay in Donald for a week, but I won money on the card games. And as Mavis was staying on for another week, I stayed on with 2 weeks just to be with her. Back in Melbourne, we got engaged in Easter and we agreed not to marry until the war was over. And we were married in September 1945. We were married at St. Patrick's Cathedral. We had our reception at Metro Hotel on Collins Street. There was only 20 people at the reception, mostly uncles and aunties of hers, and it was basically still the wartime. A lot of them gave us money, and Mavis gave it all to her mother for the reception. That was not a good start to the marriage. Anyway, her father and mother, they walked us to the station. We would have our honeymoon in Warburton, but the train went to bloody Healesville. We were on the wrong end of the train. I didn't know what to do. The bloke said, you should have changed at Lilydale. We didn't know where we were going. What were we going to sleep? Oh, what a mistake. 2 parts of the train, you see. One part went to Warburton and one part went to Healesville, and I was on the wrong part. So we went back to Lilydale and they put us up in the bridal suite at the pub. Oh, that was good luck. I was so anxious, but we had a bit of good luck and that helped out a lot. Now, despite Fred and Mavis's rocky start, they went on to be married for 61 years from 1945 until her passing in 2006. Despite the usual ups and downs, Fred described it as a happy marriage. After Mavis went into a nursing home in 1998, our family was so proud that Fred never missed one day in 8 years seeing Mavis at her home. Mavis and Fred had 4 children, Donald, Rodney, Catherine and Marie. They had 6 grandchildren, Penelope, Gillian, Jason, Jessica, Christy Lee and Cameron, and 5 great-grandchildren, Ethan, Taylor, Indiana, Harper and Curtis. From all of Fred's children's testimonies that I took back in 2012, it's very clear that Fred was always there for them. Rodney told stories of his father helping with his leg splints during his childhood. Marie told of his bedside vigils when she was young and unwell. And Donnie and Catherine talked of his unwavering love and support through thick and thin. He gave everything of himself, either by working or by attending to them directly or supporting them in their challenges and their triumphs. Only much later in life did Fred decide it was time to do something for himself, and so he took up golf. When I was younger, I liked cricket, but when I got older, I wanted to play golf. It goes back to when I was caddying, I think. I started playing golf later on when the kids grew up. I became a member of the Waverley Golf Club and 10 years at Rowville Golf Club. I joined a group that played Sunday afternoons. 4 to 6 of us would play every Sunday from 12:30 p.m. But we always stayed in the 19th and we had a few pots. I like the friendship of golf. It's the same with bingo that I do now. I love the camaraderie. We went on trips to the Murray and to Adelaide. I won in Adelaide too. I could have been a better golfer if I've applied myself a bit more, but those trips were fantastic. You got to know the guys better. Fred was also a keen fan of football and cricket, and he played a little of each. I played for East Malvern in sub-district cricket at the Melbourne High School Oval and also the East Malvern Oval. I opened the batting, but only played a few games. I did make 36 one time, they couldn't get me out. My favourite memory of cricket though is from 1934. My father took me to the Melbourne Cricket Ground and we saw Bradman make 336 in one day. That's 100 per session. It was a shield match, Victorian Queensland. When Australia went to England, we listened on a crystal set. And in 1938, when the Aussies went to England again, my dad bought a radio. We'd listen to 3DB, and if a wicket fell, they'd play Rickety Kate. I played only one game of football for South Oakley. That was a pretty short career. You need bigger hands, you see. I couldn't mark it properly because I've got very small hands. It didn't affect my cricket or golf, but those hands were no good for football. When I was younger, I didn't support Collingwood at all. I supported Essendon. But then I met Lou Richards at Diecasters and I started to follow Collingwood very closely. They didn't have a Brownlow in 1942 because of the war, but Lou won the Herald Award that year. That's still the best player in the comp. We'd go to the bar, Jack Garnett, Frankie Pumper, Lou and myself. Jack played a few games for Collingwood as well. Lou was a good bloke, but he'd never pay for a beer. Talking to Fred's character, he told me how at the three-quarter time break in the 1958 Grand Final, a win by Collingwood, he left the bar that he was at with his mates to go home and watch the end of the game with his family. He told me the favourite part of any grand final was watching the little kids get the medals around their necks after the match, and what he wanted to do was go home and watch that with his own kids. After Mavis died in 2006, Fred became a lot more involved in social groups, from the RSL and the bingo, going on regular trips with friends. Fred explained, "I met Terry on a trip to Canberra," which he said Canberra. A lot of the group didn't come because they'd been to Canberra before, so they put me and Ernie in a room upstairs, and because Ernie's got a walking frame, he's going mad at them for putting him upstairs. So I carried all Ernie's stuff up, and while he was arguing, later on we got back down. Well, it was a bit later than we planned. Now normally I sat with Marge and May and Betty Fisher, but this time I couldn't. So I was put on a table with Terry, the lady that Terry was rooming with, and a bus driver. Now, Terry and I knew one another from a trip we did to Yarrawonga when Ernie and I had played cards with Terry and Bella and Evelyn. So we started to talk and we got on very well. The other woman, she wanted me though. She was trying to hold my hand all the time. So anyway, when I got back, I asked Terry if she wanted to start a relationship. She came over the next Saturday. She didn't stay, but then after that we were going out. Before I met Terry, you got no idea how long you can be just sitting there on your own. It makes a big difference having a partner. I find it very lonely in the house by myself. You sleep better when you've got someone by your side. You can just talk together and then you drop off. I'm very happy now with Terry. When Fred was 94, he had a stroke and he moved out of the family home in Avonhurst Drive and into a nursing home. He maintained close contact with Terry and he still attended most of our family functions. Christmas Day in particular was a highlight, and it became a tradition for each of us to get a photo with Freddie, usually seated on a throne by the Santa by the tree. Fred was supported by the family, particularly Marie and Catherine, during the terrible challenges COVID threw us and is still throwing us. All through this time, we were counting down to the amazing 100-year-old milestone. It was something Fred himself had spoken of for many years, and something that brought us all great joy to witness and be a part of on April 10th this year. And the highlight for me was seeing Fred stand up and actually give a speech. Just amazing. So for the future, Fred had very few regrets in life, and he offered this advice. Be happy together. Don't hold grudges. If you have a fight, make up and be happy. He finished with these simple but honest words. I'd like to be remembered as a good person. Well, I'd say Fred Lazer achieved all of that and more. His hard work and determination to provide for his family was honest and good. He taught us as a family how to love. He sought the good in everyone around him, and he continually brought us all together to be happy together. Fred Lazer's life is a legacy of his love and devotion to his family.